Hey guys! Part 10 of What If Naruto Awakens Sage Mode at a Young Age. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 21, War Cometh. My Gigi is in the hospital, waiting for me to wake him. My father has returned, ready to be the parent I've never had. My women are sad because we have to be apart. My students are ready to learn, and I am ready to teach. My godfather is searching for a Sannin, and I must lend him my help. There is so much going on in my life right now, it's almost overwhelming. If it was up to me, I'd stay with Anko and Mei forever, but we are shinobi, we have certain duties. Our villages need us, and in this delicate time, we need to be strong. I can feel war on the horizon, and we must be ready. Me and my fellow monsters need to be ready, because war cometh. It was frightening. Mitarashi, Anko, and Tsunade Mei were considered powerful kunoichi, some of the top female ninja out there, but watching the spar before them, they couldn't help but fully realize how weak they truly were. Uzumaki Naruto was the Kamikage of Konoha. He had fought Jinchuriki, Kage, and even a Jinchuriki that was a Kage. He was considered to be the most powerful shinobi in all the nations. He was faster, stronger, and all around superior than any ninja that walked the earth. He had faced Suna, Oto, the Shinigami, and Iwa all at once, and came out the victor. Uzumaki Naruto was a god among men, the greatest there was. So why was he the one panting, and his opponent the one with the smirk? Deciding to spar after, his son introduced his love interests. Minato was surprised to hear that Naruto had managed to learn the Hiraishin. The fact that he was able to learn such an advanced technique in a month had almost been too much to take in. It had taken him the majority of his shinobi career to perfect the Nidame's technique. His son must have been a genius on a level not known to man for him to accomplish such a feat. But after sparring with his child, he quickly found something unexpected. He was better than Naruto at the Hiraishin. The prolonged use of the Flying Thunder God was close to impossible. Human beings were not meant to move that fast, and the continued jumps wore the user down, fast. Minato, having used the technique for years, was intimate with the jutsu, able to shrug the fatigue and exhaustion off just as fast as it came. He didn't know if it made him a bad father, but the fact that he was still better at something than his genius son made him happy. Of course, if they truly fought, not as father and son, but as enemies, the outcome was impossible to predict. He'd rather not think about it, though. He would die before he struck his son with malicious intent. So here he was, standing tall, his breath calm and his smirk present, while his son panted, his brow covered in sweat. His dad was too advanced in the technique they decided to exclusively use for this spar. It kind of made him laugh a little. Here he thought fighting the Shodai for real would be a nightmare. The real nightmare was his dad, the Yellow Flash. It was like trying to fight light, or sound. He was too fast, too nimble. You couldn't fight what was faster than sound, no matter how powerful you were. How anyone survived his father was something he didn't understand. No, he did understand. Those who survived a battle against the Yondaime Hokage. They were the ones he chose to spare. Well, would you look at that? A deep voice called out, walking up to the two blonde shinobi. The Gakis finally met his match. Jiraiya chuckled. Sensei, Minato greeted with a smile on his face. Oh, shut up, Ero-sennin. Naruto muttered, crossing his arms. I can still kick your ass, he said childishly. Now, kid, Jiraiya wiggled his finger back and forth. None of that talk. There are beautiful women around, after all. He smirked. Turning his head to his women, the women he loved more than life itself, he smiled. They sat together, side by side, watching him. It warmed his heart. Next to them, Sakura sat, Sasuke pressed against her front, her arms wrapped around him. Her head hung over his shoulder, her eyes closed. Sasuke, with his eyes covered in white bandages, was obviously at peace with his demons. He would soon see through his mother's eyes. Naruto made sure to that the moment they next met, which was yesterday morning, before the sun even came out. Within Sakura's warm embrace, he felt so comfortable he could stay there forever. They took each other's first times. They were bonded forever now. All these things Naruto felt within seconds, his empathy picking everything up. He then turned to Jiraiya, already knowing what was going to be said. "So you found her, then?" he whispered. "Good." He smiled. "When do you go?" Jiraiya wasn't even a little surprised, already used to his godson's abilities. "In an hour," he replied. "And you're coming with me?" Naruto raised an eyebrow. "I am?" he asked. "Hi," Jiraiya replied. "I could use your help trying to find her. Your empathy will quicken the search." "I thought you already found her," Naruto said. "One doesn't just find a Sannin kid," the sage said. "I located her general location. That's the best anyone can do, even me. We'll find her pretty quickly, don't worry." He smirked. "I wouldn't dream of keeping you away from your lovers." He said the last word with a certain emphasis, knowing how embarrassed his first student would be. And just as predicted, Minato blushed harder than Jiraiya at the female bathhouses. "Alright, I'll go." Naruto shook his head at his sensei's antics, changing the subject before his father was permanently the color of a tomato. "But we're taking Sasuke with us." He looked to his student, giving a slight nod. And to the small surprise of the others, Sasuke nodded back. Leaving a confused, but mostly curious, Minato and Jiraiya, he took his women by the hands and vanished in a gilded flash. Standing, Sasuke allowed Sakura to lead him to his apartment. He needed to pack his supplies, and more importantly, they needed to have alone time together, much like what Naruto had felt from his lovers. They were going to be apart for who knew how long. They needed to lose themselves in each other's flesh again before it was too late. Minato, having the ever-calculating mind he had, was able to determine as much, and his blush intensified. Children leaving to do such, he couldn't even think about it. And his sensei's perverted chuckling and questionable rubbing of his hands wasn't helping. Even after an incredibly tough spar with the Yondaime Hokage, Uzumaki Naruto was able and willing to make love to his lovers for as long as he could. Anko had given him the sultriest look he'd ever seen from the snake summoner, and with her breath touching his ear, and the resulting words that left her mouth, had Naruto standing at attention, in a sense. He had never thought of using the Kagebunshin, shadow clone, like that before. Suffice to say, the following activities they took part in were particularly dirty, but they never felt so good before in their lives. Now sweaty and exhausted, Anko and Mei clung to their young lover, his strong heart beating to a steady rhythm filling their ears. They were all somewhat embarrassed by what they had just done, but they also knew that everyone enjoyed themselves. The silence was finally broken by Anko. "Naruto," she began. "During the invasion, when Sasuke thought Sakura was killed, she didn't know how she should say it. Naruto could feel the words on her mind, but decided to let her speak them. He wanted both of them to speak their minds around him. He loved them, he'd understand mostly anything. I've never felt such dark chakra in my life." She finally let it out. She had been terrified of the Uchiha that day. His chakra felt darker than even Orochimaru, something she never thought she'd see. His very soul seemed to scream from the darkness, and it scared her. Naruto smirked. "Sometimes," he began, "the brightest of lights come from the darkest of places, Anko," he replied. He knew of Sasuke's overwhelmingly dark chakra, but that's exactly what made him so special. A demon was only a demon when they defied God. If they took up the flag of heaven, then they were angels, no matter what they felt like. Sasuke may feel like a demon, but he is our demon, and he will devour our enemies, as will I. There wasn't a single thing Naruto wouldn't do for his home. Anko just nodded, believing what her knight was telling her. If Sasuke had such powerful compliments, and trust from someone like Uzumaki Naruto, she knew they were someone she could feel safe around. She knew him to be a chunin, a new promotion, but a promotion nonetheless. But she just couldn't help but wonder just how powerful the young Uchiha truly was. She hadn't seen what the boy could do, not really. The fight against Gaara was spectacular, but it also ended prematurely, on both occasions. And those eyes, Those eyes that looped around crimson and black. Those eyes that were filled with brutal darkness would never leave her nightmares. She just knew, somehow, that Uchiha Sasuke was someone not to be trifled with any longer. She could just tell in the way he spoke, the way he walked. On the other side, Mei sighed. Naruto tightened his arm around the warm body of his Kiri lover, nodding his head. I know, he then tightened the arm around Anko. I don't want this to end either. He groaned, sitting upright. But I have to be at the gate in 10 minutes. He skillfully slid out of bed, collecting his scattered clothes. I already know the answer, but do you have to leave? He asked Mei with a pout. Mei nodded somewhat sadly. Yes, she began, I need to get back to Kiri. News of the invasion has already reached my borders. If I don't hurry back, my shinobi will become restless. She then gave a small smile. And don't you want my people to know that their almighty hero beat back a god? She asked. I'd rather have you all to myself. He answered honestly. Naruto knew about the hero worship Kiri felt towards him, but none of that stuff really appealed to him. Sure, it was nice to know that people appreciated him, but only in reason. When they started building statues of you and praying to you like you're some kind of messiah or god was where he drew the line. Thankfully, that hadn't started yet, or, at least not to his knowledge, but he was worried now. To the world, Uzumaki Naruto, the Kamikage of Konoha, battled the death god and beat him back, after fighting off an Otosuna incursion, and before utterly annihilating the greatest army of IWA, which included its Tsuchikage. If he wasn't straight-out worship now he'd be surprised, but grateful, oh so grateful. Excuse me? Anko asked with a somewhat mischievous smirk on her face. I think she belongs to me just as much as she belongs to you now, don't you think? She licked her lips seductively, whittling her eyebrows suggestively. For everyone, images of what had just transpired rushed through their minds, their faces reddening at the memory of their very naughty experiments. Mei just coughed into her hand, trying to force her blush down. Be that as it may, she began, not even denying the Danga-loving woman's words, which was not missed by their ninja. My village needs its Mizukage. She slipped her sandals on underneath her shin guards, and stood from the bed, now fully dressed. I'll miss you though, she then reddened again, both of you. Anko threw her trench coat over her shoulder, she too now fully dressed, or, fully dressed for Anko, and gave her a small, genuine smile, one that only Naruto, and now Mei, had the pleasure of seeing. I'll miss you more, baby. To most, that would just be a suggestive gab at the beautiful woman, but to her lovers, it was her bringing up a certain activity Mei seemed to enjoy a lot involving Anko's impressive breasts. Naruto just smiled and laughed, somewhat grateful for Anko's playfulness. I'll miss the both you too. He spoke up, rescuing a thoroughly embarrassed Mei. And I can't wait to see you two again. He looked to the window, sighing. But I have to go now. He grabbed a bag and slung it around his back, courtesy of a Kage-bunshin. He closed the distance between them, and with a passion only few people ever felt, he kissed Anko, savoring her lips, her tongue, her warmth. He then broke away, turning and doing the same with Mei, drowning in her sweet smell and taste. After catching their breaths, Anko and Mei just nodded, smiling at the powerful shinobi, wanting their happy, not to mention satisfied, faces to be his last memory of them. They knew they'd see each other again, but they were shinobi. No matter how powerful they were, death would not show mercy. I love you, Anko said softly. I love you, Mei said gently. Naruto sighed in happiness. I love you more, he replied, Hira shining out of the building, leaving Anko and Mei alone. The snake mistress looked at Mei through the corner of her eyes, seeing that she was doing the same. With a smirk and a small chuckle, Anko turned to her, smashing her lips into hers with a caring force. The deep kiss lasted for at least a minute, in which they fought for dominance with their tongues, exploring their mouths in a dazed state. When it ended, they both panted somewhat, before smiling at each other. Goodbye, Mei, Anko whispered. I love you. Bye, Anko, Mei whispered. I love you too. Both Anko and Mei knew that their love for each other was dwarfed by their love for Naruto, and that the only reason why they had these feelings for each other was due to their minds becoming one and their close proximity to one another when they were intimate with the blonde, but they didn't mind. It felt good, and they decided to just roll with it. There was no reason they couldn't act on their feelings. They didn't see the harm in it. And then, with one final smile, the two women left. Minato stood at attention, his body and skill now mirroring what it used to be. He couldn't help the small smirk on his face, which was covered by his white mask. He wore gray armor over black cloth, a mandatory tanto on his back, and his weapons pouch on his hip and right leg. His sun-kissed hair swayed with the breeze, and his breath was calm. Team Row, Nico began. Welcome our newest member, she gestured to Minato, Nezumi too. She finished, causing actions that, if not for his natural reflexes, Minato would have been smashed into the earth. Ushi, a hulk of a man, rushed towards him with speeds that shouldn't have been possible for someone of his size. The ox-masked operative raised his massively muscled arm, ready to smash the imposter. The real Nezumi was tiny on the outside, and even though the hair matched, this person was not Taicho. Minato barely had enough time to dodge the man's assault, swiveling to his right, placing an open palm on his body out of habit. Before he could react, the hulking man was upon him again, his speed almost too much for the yellow flash to handle. A giant fist was mere seconds from crushing his skull, when Nezumi-2 simply vanished in a gilded light. Before Ushi knew it, a tri-pronged kunai was pointing at his kidney. Ushi grunted, before doing something unexpected. He rotated, allowing the knife to slice his flesh clean, before bringing both of his hands up, poised to smash this pretender. Ushi, enough. Nico finally spoke, her words carrying the authority of the real Nezumi, so he listened, but kept his fists ready to take him out. What is this, Nico Taicho? Sara asked the question on everyone's mind. How could anyone take up the title of Nezumi after the Kamikage had made it so famous? There wasn't a person in the entire village, save for maybe Hatake Kakashi, who could wear the mask with confidence, and that's only because Kakashi had a similar reputation within the corps, not because he was equal in power. Rohan, Nico began, her voice stern, what we are about to discuss is an SS-class secret, one given only to you by Naruto Taicho's command. This secret will never leave your lips, and you will only hear it once. The team tensed. Something so secretive was usually Hokage ears only. The fact that their Taicho thought them worthy to know meant a lot to them. The greatest ANBU squad ever to grace Konohagakure no Sato stood straight, their demeanor that of professional assassins. Nezumi-2, take off your mask. Whatever Team Row was expecting wouldn't prepare them for what was to come. They had fought alongside the Bringer of Hope, the most powerful shinobi in all the elemental nations. They had seen Uzumaki Naruto do the impossible on multiple occasions. Whether it be destroying entire nations single-handedly, or battling gods, they stood next to him with no fear, confident in his strength and ridiculous success record. But when they finally saw what was underneath the mask of the blonde, they would find nothing but confusion and shock. Nezumi-2 smirked, placing his hand on his mouse-like mask. Taking his time, he took off his mask, lowering it so that his face was shown to the small team of the most deadly shinobi in the world. All of Rohan froze. Kid. Jiraiya finally decided to speak up after staying silent for the entire day they'd been traveling. I know why you wanted to bring the Uchiha Gaki along, he pointed his thumb over his shoulder at said raven-haired Gaki. But why did we bring the Death Glare Kid? He asked. Naruto turned his head to his newest student, chuckling at the Death Glare comment. Turning back to his godfather, he smiled. Gaara is one of my students now, he stated. We have no idea how long we are going to be gone, and I didn't want to leave him in my room at Neichan's place the entire time. He shook his head. And I need to begin training him as well. They need to be ready for when the Akatsuki stop playing around, especially Gaara. He wouldn't let the Akatsuki take Gaara's bijou from him, he refused. Jiraiya nodded, accepting the answer. All right, he then gave a pointed look. But if he starts randomly killing people, I'm blaming you. He knew exactly how unstable the Exuna Jinchuriki was, and his apparent unquenchable thirst for blood was disconcerting. Naruto just gave him a happy smile and nodded. They had been traveling for an entire day already, searching town to town all throughout High no Kuni. Apparently, one of Jiraiya's spies spotted Tsunade in the neighboring gambling villages, which, to someone as close to the woman as Jiraiya, was the obvious location of the legendary sucker. Naruto had briefly spoken to both Sasuke and Gaara about the mission, and both didn't care too much. Sasuke followed because his master asked him to come, and Gaara followed so he could learn how to truly be alive, to be awake, to be a monster. Naruto could feel these emotions in his fellow Jinchuriki, and he was almost as excited as the redhead. Another monster would soon grace the earth, and it was going to be glorious. Inoki, Tsuchikage of Awagakure no Sato, sat in his office, a faraway look on his face. He just sat there in the dark, wishing he had never crossed Konoha. How was he supposed to know that? He was so strong. Was he even human? Boy's strength was on a level so far above anything he'd ever seen before in his life, and he had even faced the nightmare that was Uchiha Madara. The blonde-haired, blue-eyed child reached to the heavens, and brought their wrath down upon his people without a second thought. The son had truly surpassed the father, because IWA had a new butcher, a new boogeyman, a new harbinger of death and destruction. The one they call Uzumaki Naruto, the Kamikage of Konohagakure no Sato, the most terrifying shinobi the aged Inoki had ever faced. He looked down at his hands. They were still shaking. He was afraid. Suddenly, his door slammed open, an upset, short-haired young woman rushing in. She wore the standard red, one-sleeved IWA shinobi uniform. Gigi. Kuratsuchi, the Tsuchikage's granddaughter, ran towards her grandfather. What happened? She asked. Kuratsuchi had been on a mission to Kumo when she heard word of what happened in Konoha, and she rushed back as fast as she could, only now arriving. She could see the sheer terror in her grandfather's eyes. It was enough to frighten her, because her grandfather was so powerful, so invincible in her eyes, that anything that could make him so fearful thoroughly terrified her. When she saw his shaking hands, she grabbed them into hers, squeezing tight. Inoki finally registered that someone had entered his office and made eye contact with his granddaughter. The heavens, he started in a shaky, breathless whisper. He shivered, they spoke. Kuratsuchi narrowed her eyes in confusion. The Kamikage, he opened the heavens, he started to panic. He's not human, he warned, he's something more. We need to prepare. A look that she'd never seen in her grandfather's eyes replaced the fear, the anxiety. Prepare for what, Gigi? She asked hesitantly. Inoki gave her a dark, sinister look, taking to the air before answering. Prepare for war, Kuratsuchi, he stated in a cold voice. We prepare for war. Are you angry? Sakura asked her best friend and rival, Yamanaka Ino, with a questioning look. She had long since left her childish battle for Sasuke-kun's love behind, instead trying to prove herself to him. She loved Sasuke, she really did, and he deserved more than a game of who gets who. Ino just sighed, picking up another stick of dango from her tray. No, she said in a defeated tone. The two sat in the Dango Cafe, a new sweets shop that opened near the Yamanaka Flowers shop. The blonde sighed again. You won, fair and square, she stated. Sakura decided not to scold her for talking about Sasuke's love like it was nothing but a fool's competition. Her face then turned mischievous. So, have you two done it yet? She asked while wiggling her eyebrows suggestively. Sakura's face went red, her mind inconveniently going limp. She opened her mouth, but was only able to sputter out incomprehensible chunks of speech, if it could even be called as such. Oh, I'd very much like to hear this as well. Another voice spoke, clearly female. How's Duckbutt in the sheets? Mitarashi Anko asked. The snake mistress had a stick in her mouth, which no doubt had dango skewered on it previously. Ino just smiled at the older woman. She now had backup. Spill, forehead, she urged. You totally did it, didn't you? By this time, Sakura was redder than a tomato. This wasn't fair. She was being assaulted on two fronts. She was so embarrassed she could hardly take it. I'll spill if you do, Anko said, giving the girls a smug, almost proud, look. At this, Both Sakura and Ino were blushing, the thought of someone like Anko sleeping with someone their age a little too much for either of them. And Sakura knew that Anko was just one of Naruto's women. Unfortunately, that thought brought the image of Naruto, Anko and Mei in bed together. Sakura's nose began to bleed. It was late. The moon was but a sliver of its full self, the stars twinkling in the thousands. It was slightly colder in the forest they settled in than in the city. The breeze was minuscule, but enough to bring chills to their bodies. They pushed through the cold, through it all, as they slowly took deep breaths in unison. "Can you feel it?" Naruto, Gaara, and Sasuke all said at the same time, effectively answering the question. Their heartbeats matched, their breathing matched, their everything, it matched. "This feeling, what is it?" Again, all three boys asked as one. The three of them smiled. "It's harmony." They spoke as a single being. They continued. Their very thoughts were shared between them. Suddenly, the presence of another appeared in the small clearing they were in, all three boys turning to face the person at the same time. Jiraiya raised an eyebrow, slightly unnerved at the synchronized movement. What's going on, kid?" he asked his godson. "I discovered this about my empathy ability a long time ago." All three answered. "I can push my empathy onto others." The three of them stood simultaneously, before breaking off individually. "I call it unity." They still spoke as one, even though they moved separately now. "It's total understanding, total harmony." They raised their right hands before clutching them, making a fist. "We can move as three individuals, but see and feel as one entity. It's maximum battle awareness." Jiraiya thought for a moment in total silence, his face not showing how he felt yet. Naruto, Sasuke, and Gaara could determine his emotions like it was the easiest thing in the world. He was impressed. The sage then smirked, bending his legs slightly. "How about we test this unity in a real battle?" he asked before rushing at Sasuke, who still had a cloth wrapped around his eyes. He was in striking distance before the raven-haired boy smirked. Suddenly, a wall of sand rose between them, effectively halting the Sannin. In a stunning display of speed and teamwork, Sasuke was at his back, his left hand encased in crackling light. Jiraiya went to move, only to realize that his leg was bound to the spot by sand. "Hari Jizo, Needle Jizo!" the Sannin called out, his mane of gray-white hair suddenly expanding, covering his entire body before sharpening. This technique could stop a regular Chidori if enough chakra was used, and Sasuke would be skewered. That's when the Uchiha vanished in a gilded flash, appearing next to the blonde. Jiraiya widened his eyes. Naruto had used the seal on Sasuke to teleport the boy to him. A reverse Hiraishin. The mere seconds of shock he felt was all Naruto needed. A tri-pronged kunai was pointed at his face, the only exposed part of his body. With a single glance, he saw sand surrounding him, poised in the air in sharp, blade-like constructs, all pointed at him. He was perfectly subdued. He had gotten used to Naruto beating him in spars long ago, but to see how easily the three of them worked together, how easily their teamwork flowed, was stunning. It was, in the only way to describe it, flawlessly graceful. No, there was another way to describe such fluid collaboration. Terrifying. The three of them hadn't known each other for very long, a few months being the longest, a few days being the shortest, and yet they fought together like they had been for years. It was absurd. It was the norm for his godson. Jiraiya shook his head. Naruto was ridiculously talented, and he knew he was going to make his students into something like him. He was going to make monsters. After a considerable amount of time, which was only a few minutes for the elite ANBU squad, Team Ro had finally accepted Nezumi too. Namikaze Minato, the Yondaime Hokage, was back, and he took up the title of his son's previous rank. He was very well the only shinobi they would accept as a replacement, him being just as legendary as his son. There was no doubt in his skill. He was a god-tier ninja. There was no doubt in his loyalty. He had sacrificed everything to ensure the safety of the village. There was no doubt in him at all, and he was welcomed into the fold easily. Minato being alive was too much of an advantage for Konoha not to keep a secret. The village's enemies would be idiotic to face Naruto now, but Naruto was a very active shinobi. He never stayed in the village for long. Konoha was by far the most powerful village of the Great Five, but with the rumors and information provided by the master spy Jiraiya about the Akatsuki called for certain countermeasures. Any organization that could control the actions of Uchiha Itachi was enough for anyone to take certain cautions. With the information of multiple bijou in the possession of Konoha in circulation, war was inevitable. The Akatsuki, apparently, were hunting Jinchuriki, or would be, and now the other nations would demand the distribution of bijou to put the balance of power back to its previous state. That, of course, was never going to happen. Uzumaki Naruto would never hurt the village, but he would slay all that opposed him when it came to the safety of his family. And if anyone even looked at his newest student, the Jinchuriki of the Ichibi, he'd do the same. He was an overprotective person, most likely due to his sister's overwhelmingly overprotective personality. So war was no longer an if matter, but a when. There was only so much one person could do, and Uzumaki Naruto was only one person, he couldn't protect everyone. That's where Minato came in. As of the moment, Minato and Naruto were the only SS-ranked shinobi in all of Hai no Kuni. People like Mato Gai and Hitaki Kakashi could hold their own against a single S-ranked ninja, but multiple. Not even the copy Nin could handle that. Konoha was by no means totally reliant on Uzumaki's power. There were plenty of powerful ninja under her command, but the kind of storm that was on the horizon, it wouldn't be enough. Jiraiya might have been able to face 2 or 3 S-ranked ninja, but he had his invaluable spy network to keep up, and that was where he was needed the most. Already the Akatsuki were most likely planning to besiege the Great Walls, and IWA no doubt would crave for revenge. Kirigakure was definitely their ally, Naruto made sure of that, but Mizu wasn't enough. Relations with Suna were rocky at best, the sand-riddled village Kageles, and without its Jinchuriki. Kyumo was an unknown. On one hand, the village also had multiple Jinchuriki, 2, to be exact, but they were a militaristic village to the core. Konoha having so many bijou in its possession would make them uneasy at the very least. And the fact that the Cloud Village had ties with IWA was disconcerting. The two villages had joined forces to annihilate Yuzushiogakure in the past, after all. So Konoha was virtually allyless sans Kiri. While the village had powerful shinobi, they wouldn't be enough to support an all-out war with so many enemies. With Minato back, attackers would be surprised, and quite frankly overwhelmed, to face both the original Yellow Flash and the new one. The two SS-ranked shinobi could fall armies in mere seconds. One was terrifying, 2 was impossible. Minato, now as Nezumi 2, was currently in a 4-man cell made up of Rohan agents. Nico had informed them that the Mizukage and the Genin team that made it to the finals, along with its Jonin sensei, were headed back to Kiri, and Team Ro was requested to see them back safely. A man Minato had actually been on missions with in the past, Ukami, was appointed the Buntecho for the mission. Ukami was an older man, with long, brilliant white hair that was tied in a simple ponytail. The wolf-masked man was someone who was revered as the greatest kenjutsu expert in all of Konoha. He was the reason the 7 ninja swordsmen were nigh extinct. He had wished to prove himself, and the heads of 5 of Kiri's best swordsmen was an accomplishment the likes of which was legendary. He was a man Minato had respected, his skill easily borderline S-rank. The squad was following the small group of Kiri shinobi from the shadows, their presence known, but only because it was told to them. Minato ran in close proximity with a blonde-haired kunoichi. Rizu was apparently a prodigy in the Yamanaka clan's mind-walking techniques, and a genjutsu expert. She obviously wasn't a frontliner, but if she was anything like Inoichi, she was just as valuable a teammate as he was. Someone who underestimated a mind-walker was a foolish person. The woman kept stealing glances at him, as if she wished to say something, but would quickly avert her gaze, staying her tongue. He wasn't sure, but with Nico's warning to her, he had a guess of what she wanted. If you even think about flirting with him, I'll make sure you stay celibate your entire life, understand? Apparently, Rizu was a flirt. He wasn't too worried though. His heart belonged to one woman, and she would have it even in death. Uzumaki Kushina was like the sun to him. She lit his path, kept him warm, and was always with him. She was the only woman he had ever been with, and she was the only woman he wanted to be with. They gave their hearts, bodies, and souls to each other, and each other alone. No one but him had touched, or even seen, her flesh, and the same was true with his. He was not an arrogant man at all, but he knew he was powerful enough now to make sure he died of old age. Even so, though, he would not betray his wife. She was waiting for him, after all. Beside Ukami was Uma. Uma had come off as a gentle, caring woman in the time he had known her, which wasn't very long at all. He had spoken shortly with all of Rohan before they left for Kiri, and the horse-masked operative had been pleasantly cheery. She had spoken about his son like he was the greatest person she had ever met, explaining the promise made to her about the Hyuga clan. His son had promised to dissolve the distinction between the main and branch families within the Byakugan-wielding clan. That was a monumental promise, one he wasn't sure could be kept, but if anyone could, it was his son. Rohan had followed the Kirinin for hours before they stopped to make camp, resting for a few hours before continuing the journey back to their home. While the Kiri shinobi rested, Minato took the time to converse with his new team. "Uma-san," he began, getting the attention of the horse-masked woman. The black-haired kunoichi turned to him. "I was wondering if you could tell me a little about an agent of Rohan." He was so curious about the hulking man that he couldn't quite understand, especially since he only spoke in grunts. "Ushi," he continued, bringing up the ox-masked man, "what's his background? He wasn't a member of the ANBU when I was in command." He had never even heard of an operative codenamed Ushi before. Uma smiled behind her mask. "Ushi is a survivor of the Blitz." When she spoke those words, Minato's whole body tensed. Seeing her newest teammate's discomfort, she continued. "He was only a genin then, but he somehow survived." Minato was silent. He was taken in by a Konoha medic Nin, who helped him recover. When he was able to walk again, Minato flinched. It was obvious that something was wrong. The blonde-haired man wished he never asked this question now. His brain processed things differently, and he lost the ability of speech. She shook her head. "He isn't brain dead, he just receives information differently. He associates authority with power." Here she giggled. "Only Nezumi could handle him, and it's only because of his orders that Ushi listens to Nico Taicho." Minato was still silent, lost in his thoughts. The Blitz was his crowning achievement. That was the day he slaughtered thousands of Iwanin in seconds. He had thought everyone that day had died by his hand, but to hear that someone had survived. He finally let out a long, pained breath. "So he survived the Blitz," he replied. "And I injured him permanently. No wonder he wanted to attack me." Uma giggled softly. "He didn't attack you because of who you are." He faced her again. "He didn't even know who you were when he attacked you, silly." That was true. He attacked you because of who you aren't. That confused him. Ushi respects Nezumi Taicho more than he respects the Hokage. He's the only person he sees worthy of any kind of recognition. Behind his mask, Minato smiled. His son had such strong bonds. For someone to wear his mask, if it was anyone but you, you'd be dead by now. The former Kage paused, taking a moment to process the information that was given to him. "He doesn't even remember the Blitz, does he?" he asked after a moment. "He's seen my face, but he didn't even show a sliver of hatred towards me." Uma shook her head. "He doesn't remember anything from his life before he woke up from his coma in Konoha." He went to reply when he noticed the Mizuki's signal for him. Taking in a deep breath to calm his mind, his sunshine body flickered to the auburn-haired woman. "Yes, Mizuki-sama?" he asked in a respectable, politically correct fashion. Mei raised an eyebrow. "I don't think a former Kage of your caliber should be addressing me in such a manner, Nezumi-san." She then blushed slightly. "Especially considering my relationship with your son." She sounded unsure of herself. "I am a Kage no longer, Mei-san." He spoke slightly less formal. "And I have no right to interfere in any relationships my son may or may not have." He wasn't totally upset with Naruto having adult relationships with two women at the same time, partly because they knew about each other, and partly because his son was a man already. He had been a shinobi for a long time. He knew what he wanted, and he could make those decisions for himself. That is actually why I wish to speak with you, Nezumi-san. She began again nervously. I'm somewhat traditional in the matters of the heart. She looked to the stars, and he understood the expression that marred her face. It was the look of a lover who hoped their other was looking at the same sky as them. And I'd like your approval in our relationship. Minato was silent, just looking the powerful woman in the eyes, searching for something. Mei, to her credit, was unflinching in the presence of the yellow flash. She sat there, perfectly still, allowing the father of the man she loved gaze at her with intensity. After a few seconds, Minato had found it. The certain look in her eyes that told him she loved his son wholeheartedly. He found that spark of love that was created when there was love between two or, in this case, three. Mei loved him, she loved his son. You really love him, don't you? He asked. He already knew the answer, but it never hurt to ask. He's the only man I've ever loved. It was true. She had been with a couple of people before, but they had never made her feel like this. She was happy, genuinely happy. He was always on her mind, always in her dreams, everywhere. He was everywhere. She could still feel his warmth, and she wanted nothing more than to be in his arms again. Then I approve, Minato answered. Mei smiled. But he paused, the aura of happiness and acceptance vanishing. If you ever betray my son in any way, he spoke so differently. The blonde-haired man usually had such a warm, caring voice, and he always felt bright. Now, however, as he looked at Mei like she was but an ant under his boot, living only because he let her live, he felt like Naruto did when he was angry. He felt like the scariest person alive. I will erase Kirigakure. Somehow, Mei knew the man was speaking in the literal, not the figurative, and the fact that he said it with such confidence thoroughly terrified her. She just nodded slowly. She knew she didn't really have anything to fear. She would never betray Naruto, ever. She'd die loving him, and then love him more in the afterlife. What did scare her was how powerful the father and son she was now bound to forever were. Namikaze Minato was the original harbinger of death, his very name sending other Kage fleeing. Uzumaki Naruto was only 13, yet he was now being called the God Slayer. These people were in a league so out of reach of normal peoples that it was terrifying. Minato turned his back, ready to walk away, before stopping. Then I leave my son's happiness to you, Mei-san. He spoke once again in his warm tone. The woman now understood. There was no reason to scare her any further. Mei was thankful for the warm tone, and she gained her composure quickly. Hi, father, she said. Minato smiled under his mask. Three figures walked in a calm pace, the numerous trees surrounding them. These trees were everlasting in this part of the world. I thought we were going to aim, Orochimaru stated suddenly, his voice defeated. Kisame smirked. He was excited. Itachi decided to take a detour, and he couldn't wait to have some fun. Don't worry, Snake. You'll meet Leader-sama again soon. We just have a little business to take care of. His shark-like teeth were as sharp as ever. Orochimaru snarled silently. I'd rather not see him again, he whispered. Silence, Orochimaru. Itachi finally spoke. You should be grateful. He continued with his ever-stoic facade. Today, we capture the one responsible for your humiliating defeat. Orochimaru licked his lips, a sinister smile on his face. Uzumaki. Chapter 22, Ultimatum. I see before me a shadow of her former self. She was the greatest, most powerful kunoichi the elemental nations has ever seen, and if she chooses the right path, I will remind her of this. She is Senju Tsunade, the slug Sannin of Konohagakure no Sato. It is time she started acting like it again. It's time the monsters showed her the light. Two figures stood outside a pub within Tanzakagai, a lively town known for its gambling opportunities and fine women. Behind them, the sounds of the ongoing festival filled their ears. It was dark, the sun having set an hour ago, and the gentle breeze was cool. I figured she'd be in a place like this. Jiraiya of the Sannin spoke in a knowing tone, his features as a man who accepted the inevitable. Let's go, Uzumaki Naruto began, taking a step into the pub. Listen, kid, Jiraiya started. Tsunade, she's not herself. His tone was hesitant. Naruto raised an eyebrow at his sensei. She's lost everyone she's ever loved to the shinobi lifestyle, he explained. I haven't spoken to her in a while, but I think she may be a bit cynical. Naruto gave a small smile. I will let you take the lead, sensei, he said. I will stay silent until I am needed. Jiraiya gave his student a look of gratefulness, sending him the emotion the best he could. He loved how Naruto didn't need words. Words were too complicated. One slip up, one misunderstanding, and relationships could be torn apart forever. Taking a second to center himself, Jiraiya pushed through the doors of the bar/restaurant. The moment he stepped in, he was greeted by warm walls and a multitude of tables, sectioned off by red dividers. The air smelt heavy of grease and sake, which, considering where they were, wasn't a surprise. It literally took 5 seconds for him to spot the woman he was looking for, as she was sitting at a table facing the entrance. Tsunade! He shouted in a cheery tone, completely masking his emotions. A woman with blonde hair and bronze eyes suddenly stood, her cheeks hinting at a small blush. Jiraiya? She called out. Taking their time, student and teacher walked to the woman. Her table was littered with sake bottles, and the young woman sitting next to her, with a pig in her arms, oddly enough, looked a little nervous. The two sat down without preamble, ordering a drink. A few minutes of silence passed before the drinks were served. Tsunade and Jiraiya gulped down sake, while Naruto just smiled back at the nervous woman accompanying the slug Sannin. After taking a rather large gulp of liquor, Tsunade sighed deeply. In any case, she began in a slightly tired voice. Today is a day I see many old friends. Jiraiya leaned over the table, pouring what was left in the sake jar into his longtime friend's cup, before downing what was left in his own. He was quiet for a second before he spoke. You mean Orochimaru? The woman next to the blonde-haired kunoichi visibly flinched, her eyes widening slightly. What happened? Jiraiya asked in a commanding voice. Unknown to the others, Naruto had gone deathly still, his mind racing with thoughts of murder and rage. Even the mention of the bastard who killed his Gigi made him incredibly furious. It didn't matter if he was alive again. The fact that he was even injured by the traitorous snake angered him. He kept his emotions in check, staying silent like he promised his sensei. He respected Jiraiya more than most, despite their friendly banter. He had taught him many important things, jutsu and life lessons alike. Tsunade gave the black-haired woman a pointed look, one that told her to keep her mouth shut. Nothing, really? The slug princess began. We exchanged a greeting. A lie, Naruto could tell. The last Senju pulled out a deck of cards from her blouse, flipping through the cards like it was second nature. She then placed the deck on the table. What about you? She asked. What do you want from me? Jiraiya picked up the cards. I'll be straight with you. He began as he started to shuffle the deck. He finished shuffling, before placing the deck back on the table, pushing it slightly in Tsunade's direction. Tsunade, it is the will of the village that you become the Godame Hokage. The legendary sucker had been reaching for the deck while he spoke, and when he finished, she froze, her hand hovering over the cards. Naruto was still silent, keeping his promise to stay quiet until he was needed. The woman to Tsunade's right, however, expressed her shock through her body language, and the little pig that had been munching on food paused, oinking in a questioning way, as if it knew what was being said. Jiraiya crossed his arms, waiting for a response, while Naruto just took in the storm of emotions that the woman was feeling. And then, like nothing had even been said, Tsunade started dealing the cards, staying silent. When both Sannin held 5 cards, Jiraiya looked the woman in the eyes. Did you know about the Sandaime Hokage? Tsunade picked up her 5 cards, giving them a short look. Orochimaru did it, right? She asked in a calm tone. I heard about it. Naruto narrowed his eyes. Directly from him, she stated. Naruto almost wanted to chuckle. The woman was holding some information back. I'll say it again, Tsunade. Jiraiya continued, ignoring her apparent conversing with the enemy. Konoha needs you to take the mantle of Hokage. His face was the picture of seriousness. Will you accept? The medic Nin felt emotions so powerful, Naruto could almost read her mind. I'll bring your beloved little brother and man back to life. The words had a distinctly grotesque feel to them, obviously the words of a serpent. Images of a man with hair such a light blue that it practically glowed alongside a boy with a huge smile on his face flashed through her mind, Naruto feeling them they were that strong. The kunoichi just stared at her cards before throwing them onto the table, face down, and giving her fellow Sannin a somewhat dirty look. Impossible, she stated in a cold voice. I refuse. Everyone was quiet, including Naruto, as Tsunade just stared at Jiraiya, her gaze determined. The toad Sannin, as it was, just smiled. I remember those words, he said. You said those same words when I asked you to go out with me. Naruto sighed at his sensei's nonsense, somewhat annoyed how this conversation was going. He had been compared to the woman on many occasions. Apparently, his chakra control was rivaled by only Senju Tsunadeheim. Tales of her valiant efforts in the wars and her incomparable battle medic prowess were always his favorite to hear about from his godfather. But the woman before him seemed like a drunken, for lack of a better word, bitch. Catching the sigh, the blonde-haired woman turned to him, raising a delicate eyebrow. Who's the gaki? She asked. Naruto had enough. Jiraiya opened his mouth to speak, but Naruto beat him to it. I'm the Kamikage, he stated in a stoic manner. Maybe you've heard of me. He added, tired of the woman's sarcasm. Not used to being in the presence of so many powerful and famous people, Shizen, the woman accompanying Tsunade, froze. Not only had she finally met all three of the Sannin, but now she was in the presence of the bringer of hope. Tsunade, being her usual stubborn self, showed no recognition to his name. Unlike your previous apprentice, this kid is quite arrogant, she said with a smirk. Naruto just chuckled softly. She thought she could hide from him. Inside, the Slugheim was just as shocked as Shizen. It's tough on anyone to be compared to the Yondaime Hokage. Jiraiya started with a smirk of his own, only Naruto and himself knowing why. He had all the qualities to be the greatest ninja in all history. Naruto smiled. Brimming with talent in jutsu, and he had a brilliant mind. He then gave off a smug look. Popular with people and well, he was as handsome as me. But even that Yondaime Hokage died quickly, Tsunade stated suddenly. Naruto gave her a glare that could kill, not that she noticed from behind her cards. Risking his own life for the village, she stared at her cards and continued. Life is different from money. Shizen looked like she disagreed with what her Shursho was about to say. To easily risk it and lose it is a fool's doing. Below the table, Naruto clenched his fists. Tsunade continued. Both my grandfather and the Yondaime Hokage seemed to want to subdue the disturbances of war above all else. She was giving a small smirk that held nothing but contempt. But after all, they died in vain, in the midst of their dreams for the village. Jiraiya cast a glance at Naruto, knowing that Tsunade was on thin ice with the way she spoke. He then looked to Tsunade, a disappointed expression marring his face. You have changed, Tsunade. Jiraiya started. I don't know what you thought in your heart before, but to say such a thing out loud. Tsunade just smiled a humorous smile, placing her chin on her hand. Although I look young, I'm already in my 50s. Her eyes were closed as she spoke. Years change people. She opened her bronze orbs to stare into Jiraiya's black ones. Same goes for Sarutobi-sensei. Naruto felt the words she was about to utter before they even left her tongue. No wonder he died showing off at that old age. Jiraiya scowled, while Naruto tried with all his willpower to hold back. The woman was speaking against God, after all. Tsunade felt her fellow blonde's anger towards her. She stared at him blankly before returning to her cards. Apparently, her cards weren't to her liking, because she sighed deeply, before she leaned her head back against the wall. Hokage is a bother. She spoke those ugly words into existence. No one but a fool would take it on. As soon as she spoke such blasphemy, all hell broke loose in the pub. Naruto snapped. chakra, the likes of which she had only felt when Jiraiya truly craved mayhem and entered the honorable sage mode, fell upon them, frightening everyone present. The table they were sitting at was smashed to pieces, sake bottles and scraps of food thrown everywhere. Tsunade was pushed up against the wall, now standing, with Jiraiya's back facing her. He was in a defensive position, and that's when she noticed it. The boy's eyes were ablaze with molten gold, his pupils slit. Jiraiya, he was protecting her from him. "Move aside, sensei!" Naruto shouted. He was so furious. All he saw was red. "Don't!" Jiraiya pleaded. "We're in a pub. There are a lot of civilians in here." He could see the reasoning behind his godson's anger, but he couldn't condone it. He knew he couldn't beat the blonde in a fight, but he also knew that Naruto would never truly harm him. They were comrades, and most importantly, they were family. "I said move aside," he stated again, his voice even more serious than before. Tsunade was wide-eyed before she saw that he couldn't, or wouldn't, brush past her old teammate. Seeing that he was stopped by Jiraiya, she huffed. Naruto met her gaze, a look of pure rage held within them. "Anyone who makes fun of my Gigi and father." Immediately, Tsunade made the connection between the yondaime and the boy, his words confirming her theory. Uzumaki Naruto was the son of the yondaime. It doesn't matter who you hide behind. The magnitude of his chakra increased slightly, seriously making Tsunade see him as a threat. "I'll end you." Everyone was silent. Jiraiya watched his godson, making sure he didn't make a move. He knew Naruto was upset, but Tsunade was the only person who could heal Hiruzen. They couldn't afford it if she died. Shizen stared worryingly at her Shursho, seriously scared for her. The Kamikage was a powerful shinobi, and they hadn't even heard of his actions in the invasion. Tsunade stared at the young shinobi, giving him a stoic look. She then smirked. "You're pretty gusty, confronting me like this." She paused. "Let's take this outside, Gaki," she finished. "Tsunade-sama!" Shizen shouted. Naruto just smiled. She had given him what he wanted. Jiraiya sighed deeply, hoping his godson would hold back. He didn't want Tsunade to die. Tsunade was very, very nervous. She was a very powerful kunoichi, most likely the greatest of all time, but even she knew her limits. With how long she'd been out of service coupled with her intense drinking problem, she knew she wasn't at the top of her game. That's why, when Orochimaru, a man she hadn't seen in years, approached her, with two people even she knew to be dangerous at his side, she knew she was putting Shizen, the last person she could truly call family, in danger. There was no land that Uchiha Itachi's name hadn't spread. His very name was the epitome of fear and treachery. He was a man of unrivaled skill, one of the few who could be compared to the Kamikage of Konoha. He was a man every Kage was wary of, a man who could kill an entire clan before anyone even knew about it. He was someone even the Sannin had to be cautious around. Orochimaru knew that firsthand. So when Tsunade saw those crimson eyes in the company of the serpent, she knew something absolutely awful was heading her way. And then there was the shark, the man who had so much chakra. He was called the Tileless-tailed beast. Hashigaki Kisame was a name written in every bingo book since the day he betrayed Kiri, 7 years ago. Many S-rank shinobi from many different villages had tried to capture this man, this monster, for years, and every attempt had ended in gruesome failure. He was a man whose body count reached the thousands, and you'd be an outright fool not to be cautious in his presence. His appearance with the Uchiha and renegade Sannin, Tsunade could only hope they didn't see through her tough act. She was by no means weak, still very well within her S-rank limits, but there had been a time when even all three of these men wouldn't cause her such anxiety. Sannin were borderline SS rank, and they didn't fear much. But with Shizen to her side, she was absolutely terrified. "Orochimaru," she began, "long time no see." Her tone was even, not betraying her disdain in seeing him again. "Tsunade," the snake replied. "What do you want, Orochimaru?" The slug Sannin continued, somewhat annoyed. "Surely you didn't come to talk about old times." She slowly began to position her footing, not knowing if or when they were going to be attacked. She could see Shizen's tense form, obviously nervous about being so close to such deadly missing Nin. Orochimaru actually snorted. Nothing like that, I assure you. Tsunade raised a brow. Oh? She took in his sickly pale skin and bandaged arms. What happened to you, Orochi? She asked in an unworried tone. She couldn't care less what happened to the twisted man she used to call comrade. Just a little something I acquired when I killed the Sandaime Hokage. He practically sang. Both Tsunade and Shizen tensed, eyes widening. Tsunade was shocked, before she gave an enraged look. Don't give me that look, Tsunade-chan, Orochimaru playfully said, angering the woman further. So scary. He finished. Enough. Itachi finally spoke, gaining everyone's attention with a single word. This petty back and forth is not the reason we have searched for you. Tsunade looked the younger ninja in the eyes, trying her hardest not to show fear. And why exactly have you sought me out? She asked the Konoha missing Nin. She had never personally met the man, having left the village before he was even born, but she, like everyone else, had heard of him. We'd like you to join our organization, the large man named Kisame said, a toothy grin marring his face. Tsunade narrowed her eyes. The Akatsuki? Itachi started. Our organization is powerful enough to fall nations, and we'd like you to join us. You bring these children to me, asking me to join your new club, Orochi? Tsunade asked. She wore a smile that expressed no happiness. Why would I ever consider joining your organization, and why would you? She asked Orochimaru specifically, not really wanting to converse with the other two. They said they'd heal my arms, he began, and help me kill the person responsible for a recent failure. After he thought about it, he was actually glad to join the Akatsuki again. He had only fled from them because of his actions against Itachi, but that didn't seem all that important anymore. The organization was by far the most powerful group of shinobi on the planet, and with their materials and support, he could accomplish so much. Orochimaru was officially a loyal member of the Akatsuki. I'm tired of this, Orochimaru, Tsunade said. I don't wish to join any organization. She continued. Now disappear, before I make you disappear. Orochimaru just laughed. Such a temper. He chuckled some more. You haven't changed one bit. Tsunade gave him a cheery smile. No, I have not. She agreed. And you know my personality. She then narrowed her eyes somewhat. So leave. Her fist met the stone behind her, the entire wall, which ran for quite a long distance, crumbled like glass. Or I'll kill you. You haven't heard what you'd get in return for joining, Orochimaru replied, a disgusting smirk on his pale face. I'll give you to the count of 5. She continued, her expression a serious one. 1. She began. Oh, she's counting. Kisame whispered loud enough for everyone to hear, mock fear lacing his tone. 2. She continued counting when they appeared to not move, disregarding her warning. It's not an unpleasant offer, Tsunade. Orochimaru started. You should hear us out. 3. Was her only reply. Such a suborn woman, eh? Kisame quipped. 4. She continued, even though she really just wanted to kill the shark-faced man that instant. Itachi watched the whole thing with cool stoicism. 5. I'll bring your beloved little brother and man back to life. Orochimaru interrupted her counting, stopping her mid-word. Both Tsunade and Shizen froze, their eyes wide, their hearts all but stopping. Nawaki. Dan. Alive? Orochimaru gave a sinister smile. The Akatsuki has that kind of power, Tsunade. He started. We have that kind of power. He finished, gesturing to himself and his fellow Akatsuki members. The two women were silent, the snake's words in their heads, repeating over and over. Can we take your silence as a yes? Kisame asked with his ever-present smirk. Tsunade-sama. Shizen finally spoke up. You can't trust these traitors. She continued, gaining the courage to even speak in front of such powerful shinobi. They are missing Nin. The worst kind, no less. They can't be. Shut up, Shizen! Tsunade shouted, causing the black-haired woman to pause, her expression that of someone struck. You don't have to decide now. Orochimaru spoke. But we will expect a pleasing reply soon, Tsunade. He finished by licking his lips with his nasty tongue. Just as fast as the men had appeared, they vanished, leaving the two alone with their thoughts. There was only one thing on the Slugheim's mind. Dan. Tsunade stood in front of Naruto, a smirk that spoke of her coming victory marring her face. Both Jiraiya and Shizen, who was holding Taunton, stood to the side, their faces that of worry. Shizen hoped Tsunade wouldn't seriously wound the hero of Kiri. Jiraiya, on the other hand, hoped Naruto wouldn't kill his old teammate. Alright kid, Tsunade began, let's see if all those rumors about you are true. She taunted. Naruto showed no emotion, his face as stoic as ever, his anger schooled, not controlling him, but the other way around. Uzumaki Naruto was the master of all emotions, and he wouldn't let one rule him. Tsunade knew the boy was powerful, ridiculously so. She had heard rumors of his prowess. She had been through Kiri after the Civil War, and tales of the bringer of hope were sung all throughout the village, damn near the entire country. He was their liberator, their all-powerful hero, the child monster who slew a Kage to free an entire nation. She couldn't hold anything back, she knew that. That's why, before they even indicated that the fight had started, Tsunade rushed him with impressive speed, her hand poised to smash him into unconsciousness. Shinobi rule number 2, a good strike is a preemptive strike. And then, Tsunade was shown just how out of her league she truly was. Both Tsunade and Shizen went wide-eyed, shocked beyond belief at what they were seeing. Within Naruto's inescapable grip, Tsunade's fist was stopped cold. They aren't rumors. Naruto whispered so that only Tsunade could just barely hear his words. Letting her fist go, he bent his knees, slamming an open palm strike into the woman's stomach, sending her crashing through the dirt street, landing in a, thankfully, unoccupied building, effectively destroying the innocent property. Standing from the debris, a slightly bruised Tsunade glared at the blonde, her hand ablaze with green flame. Medical ninjutsu. Kato Dan and Senjin Iwaki. Naruto stated the names like he was somehow familiar with them. Tsunade was shocked for all but 3 seconds before her eyes narrowed a dangerous glint within them. Don't you ever? Orochimaru offered to bring them back, didn't he? He already knew the answer, so Tsunade's surprised expression was unneeded. And here I respected you as an equal. He looked at her disappointingly. Now I see you're nothing but a typically foolish girl. He didn't actually feel superior to women. He knew they could be just as powerful as men, but he needed to get a reaction from her. Tsunade was what every kunoichi wished to be, a goal to reach, a motivation for every aspiring kunoichi. What he was seeing, from what he knew to be a powerful ninja, was something that looked disgusting on her. Weakness. Tsunade was proof that men and women were equals, that discrimination between genders was foolish. She was a woman who could take on an army. She was a woman who could face Kages. She was a woman who could fight alongside men, them knowing they could count on her to watch their backs. She was the epitome of feminine strength, and that is why Naruto had respected her more than he cared to admit. But this person in front of him, this weak drunk, was not a woman. She was a girl, a petty, selfish girl. Tsunade, for reasons she couldn't fathom at the moment, flinched under his disappointed glare, somehow disappointed in herself at how she was acting. You disgust me. Naruto began, keeping his sexist facade going. I was a fool to believe a woman could be my equal. He really didn't feel superior to women. Dan and Iwaki would be ashamed. He was superior to both men and women. That seemed to flare the emotion he was looking for. Rage. He could work with rage. Self-hatred was too difficult, but rage was easy. With a battle cry, Tsunade rushed to Kamikage, her entire body encased in chakra. At that moment, Naruto woke the sleeping giant. He stoked the flames. There's your will of fire! He shouted before rushing at the Sannin, a giant smile on his face, his body burning with massive amounts of natural energy. The two exchanged mighty blows. Every hit roared like thunder, every kick crackled like lightning. The village shook from the resulting shockwaves, scaring the hell out of the villagers. Bones broke, only to heal seconds later. This was truly an S-rank battle, and Naruto loved it. He felt awake, he felt excited. Tsunade had awoken the monster. And by the subtle curve of her lips, she was enjoying herself as well. They were having fun. By this time, Jiraiya and Shizen had to back up several steps, the shockwaves created by the two literally pushing them back. They even had to shield their faces with their arms from the gust of pressure that was sent their way. It was almost scary, watching the two duel with taijutsu. With a single punch, either of them could destroy mountains. This lasted for several minutes, before the two stopped simultaneously, a silent agreement to pause. They both somehow knew what the other felt, exchanging blows as they did. They both knew that Tsunade couldn't continue without using certain techniques, and she doubted Naruto wouldn't do just the same. She had felt how strongly he was holding back, and as much as it annoyed her, it made her respect him more. He handicapped himself so that they could fight like they just did, and she hadn't had that much fun in a long while. Tsunade huffed slightly, her smirk still present. "You're good, I'll give you that." "You're not so bad yourself," Naruto replied. "You're still foolish for trying to fight me alone," Tsunade continued. "You have no idea what I'm capable of, Gaki." It seemed like some of her confidence had returned, just as he had planned. Naruto just chuckled. "I'm not alone," he stated, causing Tsunade to raise a brow. She looked towards Jiraiya, an expression of dismissal on her face. "Jiraiya?" she asked, incredulous. "He'd never hurt me unless I sought the destruction of the village," she said confidently. It was no secret how the Toad Sennin felt about her. She just couldn't reciprocate those feelings. She had tried, with Jiraiya, but she just couldn't. The moment he touched her, she felt like she was betraying Dan. At that moment, Naruto smirked. Tsunade froze, a chill running up her spine as two figures walked directly past her from behind, coming close enough to breathe on her. They walked up to Naruto, turning to face her. "I am capable of much, much more as well, Tsunade-san," he replied. Sasuke and Gaara gave no expression, their faces schooled into cool stoicism. This was a part of their training. A shinobi needed to be able to mask all emotion at any given time. Shinobi rule number 4, deception is just as lethal as a kunai, if used correctly. And with Sasuke's eyes still covered in bandages, it was extremely easy to hide his humored feelings. They had just slipped past the Sanin's defenses like child's play. Naruto then looked the woman in the eyes, a serious expression marring his face. "One of those capabilities," he began, his voice holding such authority, "is complete resurrection." His words froze Tsunade. "What's the point in this?" Sasuke asked. He was slightly agitated at their current activity, not seeing the importance. "I would also like to know, Shursho," Gaara added. He was just as confused as his fellow student. He couldn't see the reasoning behind their newest training. Naruto smiled. "It's important," Naruto replied. "Don't you two trust me?" he asked. Gaara answered immediately. "Of course." "HN," Sasuke answered in his unique way. "Then stay silent, and most importantly." As the three sat in a meditative position, their eyes closed, yet somehow still open, Naruto gave a monstrous smirk. "Stay perfectly still." It had been 4 days since Naruto had faced off against Tsunade. He gave her a choice. She could join the Akatsuki. How he knew this, she hadn't a clue, and inevitably die by his hand, because he was going to erase the organization's name from the elemental nations, with her lover and brother by her side. That had caused some tension between the two, which Naruto easily brushed off. Or she could become the Godame Hokage. She was told that she was needed for an important task, and if she accepted both the title of Hokage and the mystery task, she could, if she still chose, have both Dan and Nawaki resurrected. Naruto had no idea if Nawaki's or Dan's bodies still existed. Most shinobi were cremated, but that didn't matter. He didn't like it, but he knew how to work the Edo Tensei, and he could access their bodies with that, if need be. Bringing them to life would be difficult, but not impossible. With a little more experience and medical ninjutsu training, which he tended to ask Tsunade about later, he could master the art of bringing the dead back to life. Where there was a will, there was a way. He gave her a week to decide her path in life. Was she going to join the enemy and fall at Konoha's hands, or would she stay loyal and true, and become the Godame Hokage that the village needed so desperately? The Sandaime was still no doubt holding on to life by a thread, and Tsunade was really their only hope. Technically, Naruto could flood life energy and healing chakra into the professor's body, but that was risky, for the both of them. Naruto wasn't used to using raw life energy to heal wounds. One mistake, one slip up and he could die. It also could affect his Gigi. Too much life energy, ironically, could kill someone. It was almost laughable. Life could cause death, ridiculous. Naruto left Tsunade to make her decision by herself. He now knew exactly how her chakra felt like she couldn't run from him. He kept his distance, training Sasuke and Gaara while Jiraiya peeped on women and relished in the shinobi vices. He didn't mind though, that's how his godfather was, and he accepted it. Jiraiya had fought with his life to serve the people of Hai no Kuni. Harmless peeping and casual sex was his coping mechanism. If he ever forced himself onto a woman or anything the like, Naruto would step up and put his sensei in his place. But Jiraiya was not that kind of person. He was a peace-seeking man. He'd rather die before he took that freedom of choice from another individual. And most women knew who the man was, and his reputation. They'd hit him over the head for the principle of it, but never felt actual hatred for the man. They didn't approve of his little perverted hobby, but they didn't seek total retribution either. It was more like an annoyance more than anything. Everyone had a way of coping with the shinobi lifestyle. If you didn't have something, you'd go crazy. Naruto coped by doing his job to the best of his ability. He was never more awake than when he was slaying demons. Well, Anko and Mei made him feel awake, very awake, but he couldn't have that all the time. It was more than a coping mechanism, it was his love. Sasuke finally found his in Sakura. That girl would be safe as long as he took breath. His Aniki read those smut novels his godfather wrote, and he visited the Fallen Heroes Monument on a daily basis. "Are you ready?" Naruto asked his student. This was the moment Gaara was waiting for, the moment he never thought would come. "Hi," he answered. "Then close your eyes." The blonde continued. "I'll see you in your mindscape." Those were the last words Gaara heard before he was standing in his mindscape, the mighty Bijou before him silent for once, just waiting. Gaara's mindscape was much like Naruto's, not that he knew it, in that it was filled up to the knee in water. The seal, however, was very different. Instead of a mighty, unbreakable cage, Shikaku was chained to non-existent walls, a collar-like chain wrapped around his neck. Drip. With a sudden distortion of air, two more figures appeared in the mindscape. Meeting the Bijou's gaze, Naruto smiled. "Hello, Shikaku." He greeted the Ichibi, a small smile on his face. The Bijou noticed Sasuke at his side. The giant Tanuki narrowed his eyes. "Under those bandages," he spoke, before Sasuke smirked. Shikaku growled deeply at the Uchiha, at the boy who possessed those eyes. "Sasuke is my student, Shikaku." Naruto started, his voice that of absolute power. "You have nothing to fear." A lie and the truth all at the same time. "I'm not afraid of him." Shikaku lied. "He just annoys me." He growled again. Those flames fucking hurt. He wasn't going to mention how dark the boy's chakra had felt that day. That chakra had been darker, more malevolent than a pist of Kurama. It was true darkness. Naruto, however, could read a Bijou just as easily as he could read a human. "I'd like to take these chains off of you, Shikaku," Naruto began. "You have been chained like a mindless animal for too long, and I'd like to free you." Shikaku was only slightly surprised. He knew how his and Kurama's relationship was, but he had never thought he would be offered the same. "What's the catch?" Shikaku asked. He had been in prison much longer than his siblings. He lost any kind of trust in humanity hundreds of years ago. Naruto sighed. "No catch." He started. "All I ask is for you to work alongside Gaara." At these words, the tanuki began to laugh hysterically. Me, working with a mortal? He looked at Naruto like he grew a second head. I'd rather stay chained. I told you, Gaara stated in his deep, growl-like voice. Shikaku. Do not speak my name like you are worthy, Gaki, the giant Biju yelled. With another distortion of air, the Kyuubi, in all its glory, stared at his youngest brother with a glare that silenced the Biju in seconds. Keep your voice down, Tanuki, Kurama spoke. You'll annoy me. Naruto smiled. His partner did not enter Gaara's mindscape because he was annoyed, but because he thought Naruto was the one who had been yelled at. No matter how powerful the human was, Kurama was his partner. They faced everything together. After an irritated silence, Shikaku roared. Shut up, Fox. He tried to move, but the chains stopped him. That superior attitude of yours is what's annoying. Kurama merely chuckled. The truth is annoying? He asked innocently. I am superior to you, Tanuki. The Kyuubi waved its massive tails for all to see. Acceptance is the first step. Shikaku growled once more, before Naruto stepped in. Enough of this, he said with finality. With a wave of his hand, Son Goku and Isabu, the Yanbi and Sanbai, appeared next to Kurama. I am the child of prophecy, Shikaku. At this, the raccoon-like chakra construct looked to his right, as if he already knew this. Gaara is my student, my ultimate defense. He smirked. Sasuke is my eyes, and Gaara is my shield. He locked eyes with the Sand Biju. The Biju are being hunted, and without my help, they will be captured. Naruto knew the organization Itachi was spying on was terrifyingly powerful. Join us, and help me save your brothers and sisters. Shikaku was silent for a moment before he began. Why would I want to help any of them? He asked. They treat me like I'm nothing because I only have a single tail. I'm looked down on by those very brothers and sisters, mocked for just being. He ranted. Why would I want to help siblings like that? Naruto held the Biju's gaze. You cannot lie to me, Shikaku. He spoke in a confident tone. I know you do not truly despise your siblings. The Tanuki scowled. In my eyes, the one who protects even those who belittle them is the strongest. He would know, he had personal experience with it. That's why you should help me, help Gaara protect them. He raised both of his arms. We are creating something huge here, Shikaku, something the world has never seen. And I would like your help in achieving that. There is a storm on the horizon. War cometh, and it will be like nothing anyone's ever seen before. Join us, brother, Isabu said. We need you, Bro-san seconded, grinning like the monkey he was. We've had a strained relationship, haven't we? Gaara suddenly asked. His voice was low, his expression one of cold acceptance. When you fall asleep I will possess your body and soul, and murder all of you humans. The words Shikaku spoke to him when he was a child were still fresh in his mind. Be careful not to sleep too deeply. Gaara continued. You've plagued my nightmares, forcing me into sleep deprivation. He looked at his reflection in the water. You made me into a bloodthirsty beast. You're all worse than us beasts. Again, Shikaku's words flooding his brain. But you and I are more the same than either of us would like to admit. Shikaku huffed. We are nothing alike. Gaara didn't show his irritation at being interrupted. No? He raised a single finger. We were both called demons, a second finger. We were both forced into this relationship, a third finger. We have both been forsaken by family. With those words, Shikaku remembered the words of the last man he respected, his likeliness to the Rikudo Sennin earning him the trust of the most untrusting being in creation. There will definitely be someone that will save and guide you too. Once you've accepted that person's hidden heart, you will also understand the meaning of the words, my master carved into my hands. Kokoro. Yukuru. People who share similar pain, they are the ones who can truly understand each other. Naruto somewhat disagreed with Gaara, but he stayed his tongue, knowing that the red-haired shinobi had broken through. Silence flooded the mindscape, the tailed beast of the desert just staring at his container. And then he spoke. My motto is absolute defense, Gaki. He shouted. Don't forget it. It's my pride as Shikaku. It was the only way he knew how to accept their offer. He would join them, and defend everyone with all his might. The resulting smile on everyone's face would have scared Kami herself. One by one, Naruto, Sasuke, Gaara, Shikaku, Isabu, Son Goku, and Kurama flared their chakra, the mindscape shaking. Suddenly, the chains around the Ichibi shattered, unable to withstand the pressure of such powerful energy. Shikaku was finally free after 400 years of subjugation. And he was going to rip the world a new one. Oh. You are already at it, I see. Jiraiya suddenly spoke, entering a small stand. Sitting at the stand was Tsunade and Shizen, the former drinking sake. The Slugheim looked to the tall man through the corner of her eye, Shizen turning her entire head to greet the legendary man. Why are you here? Tsunade slightly sneered. Jiraiya merely smirked. You're cold. Don't say that, he replied. Shizen gave the Sannin a pleading look. Jiraiya-sama. Jiraiya looked at the younger woman. Shizen, could you leave us? He asked. He closed his eyes. It's been a while. I want to drink with her again. Nodding, Shizen stood, letting Jiraiya take her seat. As she walked away, she could hear him ordering sake and radish. Walking a short distance, she turned around and bowed. I'm counting on you, Jiraiya-sama, she whispered. After thanking the cook for the radish and sake, he looked at Tsunade, a smirk on his face. Is he on your mind? He asked. She turned to her old teammate. Who? Jiraiya's smile only widened. Naruto, he replied. Tsunade turned. She had a stubborn look on her face. Not particularly. She lied. Still, it was foolish taking him on as an opponent. He began in a serious voice. You could have seriously died if you pushed him too far. Tsunade just clicked her tongue, disregarding his words. What's wrong with you? Tsunade was acting like someone he didn't know. He barely recognized her. None of your business. She snapped at him, causing him to stay silent for a moment. Have you made up your mind yet? He asked. Tsunade stayed silent. Don't rush to a decision, he continued when she stayed quiet. And let me just tell you one thing. Jiraiya was speaking in a voice that he used when he wanted people to listen, and listen. Tsunade did. The successive line of Hokage has protected Konoha, and those living in it. They brought troubled times under control and helped the village prosper. His voice became slightly more aggressive. They risked their lives for this dream, for this ideal. His voice softened. You're not someone who can't understand the feelings of the previous Hokage. His voice then darkened. Just try doing something to betray Konoha. Tsunade looked at him with a scowl. If that happens, I'll kill you. He spoke with total conviction. It has nothing to do with me now. Tsunade shouted, annoyed that Jiraiya spoke to her like he could actually kill her. And the fact that, in sage mode, he probably could only made her more annoyed. A person who has experienced the death of people close to them and doesn't feel anything is just a butcher. There was a small pause. You're different, aren't you? No one cared for the welfare of the villagers more than you. He then smiled. Until Naruto was born. This got her attention. The entire village hated him, despised him for being the Jinchuriki. Tsunade scowled. But he served Konoha in a way no one before has. He smirked. I've personally seen the kid take on entire armies. Just the other day, he summoned the Shinigami and beat him back in a battle of will. Tsunade looked at Jiraiya as if he was crazy. He's a monster, Tsunade, a true monster who would rip his own throat out if the Hokage asked him to do so. Enough of the lecture, Jiraiya. The last Senju finally spoke. What's the point in telling me all of this? The point, he explained, is that if you choose Orochimaru, if you choose the Akatsuki, he looked her in the eye, a sad look in his dark orbs, he's going to be the one you will have to face. He sighed, shaking his head. And trust me when I say this, Tsuna-chan, why didn't she get upset when he used her nickname? You won't survive that fight, he warned. Tsunade was silent for a long moment before she finally asked, her curiosity getting to her. Just how powerful is the Yandame's child? Jiraiya didn't even look at her, instead he closed his eyes, focusing on the question. To be honest with you, he began in a voice that she had never heard come from his mouth, I have no idea. He finally looked at her. And it scares the hell out of me. Naruto breathed in and out in a peaceful rhythm, his mind totally void of thought. Staying still was extremely difficult for humans to accomplish, and it proved to be incredibly hard for Sasuke and Gaara. The Kagebunshin method was useless. Neither of them had the kind of experience in the technique to accelerate training, so they had to find another way. And that other way was unity. Through the combined empathy, Naruto could actually show his students how to properly meditate, how to breathe, how to absorb the energy that floods the world. He took in a deep breath, his body still, his mind clear. Sasuke and Gaara followed, mirroring their sensei. Naruto stirred his chakra, his students copying him in the exact manner. He then stopped the flow of his chakra, letting it build, condense. When Gaara and Sasuke did the same, the three of them smirked. It was only a matter of time now. Suddenly, 6 kunai raced at Naruto from his back, so silent, so fast that ordinary shinobi would have been dead before they knew anything was wrong. But the 3 meditating shinobi were not ordinary. With incredibly impressive speed, a thick blanket of sand rose from behind the blonde, the kunai sticking into it harmlessly. A 7th kunai suddenly rushed the Kamaku's face, it too faster than average men could perceive. That's when the blade was caught in the hands of Uchiha Sasuke, stopping it mere inches from Naruto's face. It was instant reaction, the likes of which would not be possible without the increased threat perception granted by unity. Impressive, a very familiar voice spoke. You have been busy, haven't you, senpai? Naruto smiled. Ah, he chuckled, finally opening his eyes. Itachi. That's it for part 10. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.